What if everything you thought you knew about war movies was incomplete? What if the real stories were not about victory but survival? Not about heroes but human limits? In this countdown, we are uncovering 10 war films from 2025 that do not just show conflict, they pull you inside it. Each one reveals a different truth, and by the end, one will stay with you longer than you expect. In the Fire of War, 2025. War does not begin with gunfire, it begins with silence. A tension so thick that even breath feels dangerous. That is where this story places you. Not in glory, not in victory, but in the fragile space before everything breaks. This film follows soldiers pushed into a conflict where leadership is uncertain and survival becomes the only objective. There is no grand speech, or no heroic music guiding the moment. Instead, there is confusion, orders that feel incomplete, faces that carry fear beneath discipline. The battlefield here is not just physical, it is psychological. Every decision carries weight. Every hesitation risks death. What separates this film from conventional war narratives is its focus on command under pressure. The leaders are not portrayed as flawless figures. They hesitate. They doubt. They carry the burden of knowing that one wrong move could erase entire lives. The camera lingers on those moments. It forces you to sit with them, to feel the cost of authority. Combat scenes are grounded and restrained. They do not glorify violence, they expose it. The chaos feels disorganized. The danger feels immediate. You are not watching action. You are witnessing survival in its rawest form. And as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that war is not defined by victory or defeat. It is defined by what it takes from those who endure it. The film does not ask you to admire these soldiers. It asks you to understand them, and that makes it far more unsettling. Because once you understand them, you realize how easily anyone could become them. The Last Front, 2025. Before the soldiers arrive, before the trenches are carved into the earth, there are families, there are homes, there is a life that feels permanent. This film begins in that world, and then it slowly tears it apart. Set during the invasion of Belgium in World War I, the story shifts the focus away from generals and armies. Instead, it follows civilians caught in the path of something unstoppable. Farmers, fathers, children, people who never chose war yet are forced to live inside it. The brilliance of this film lies in its perspective. The battlefield is not distant. It arrives at the doorstep. You see the transformation of ordinary people as they are pushed into extraordinary circumstances. Fear turns into resistance. Helplessness turns into defiance. And survival becomes the only truth that matters. There is a haunting stillness in many scenes. Moments where nothing happens, yet everything changes. A glance between characters. A decision made without words. The film understands that war is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, and that quiet is far more terrifying. As violence escalates, the emotional weight deepens. Loss is not presented as spectacle. It is intimate, personal, devastating in ways that linger long after the moment has passed. The film does not rush these emotions. It allows them to breathe, to settle, to haunt. By the end, you are left with a question that refuses to fade. What does it mean to protect something when everything around you is being destroyed? And the answer is not heroic. It is human. Painfully human.
Did not go after his killer.
The Battle of Oslo, 2025. War does not always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it arrives with precision, quiet, calculated, almost surgical in the way it takes control. This film captures that moment when a city realizes it is no longer its own. Set during the German invasion of Norway in World War II, the story focuses on the strategic and emotional collapse of Oslo as forces move in with overwhelming efficiency. There are no drawn-out battles in the beginning, no warning that gives people time to prepare, just a sudden shift where normal life fractures and authority changes hands. What makes this film stand apart is its focus on occupation rather than combat. The tension is not built through explosions, but through control. You watch as systems begin to fail. Communication breaks down, while leadership struggles to respond, and civilians are left trying to understand what is happening in real time. The narrative moves between multiple perspectives: military officers attempting to organize resistance, government officials facing impossible decisions, ordinary citizens caught in the middle of something far larger than themselves. This layered approach creates a sense of scale without relying on spectacle. There is a chilling calm that runs through much of the film. Moments where nothing violent occurs, yet the threat feels overwhelming. Soldiers standing in formation, orders being delivered without emotion, the quiet presence of power replacing the chaos of battle. This restraint makes the situation feel even more real. As resistance begins to form, the tone shifts. Subtle acts of defiance emerge. Small decisions carry enormous risk. The film captures how courage often starts quietly before it becomes visible. These moments build tension in a way that feels deeply human. Visually, the film uses contrast to great effect. The beauty of the city against the harsh reality of occupation. Familiar streets transformed into controlled spaces. This juxtaposition reinforces the central idea that war is not just destruction. It is control. It is the loss of freedom without warning. By the time the story reaches its peak, you understand something unsettling. War does not always need chaos to be devastating. Sometimes all it needs is control.
Så åpnet døra. Jeg
Det er forlatt.
Operation Hadal, 2025. Some missions are not meant to be understood. They exist in shadows where truth is classified and consequences are buried. This film drops you into that darkness from the very first moment. A covert military operation unfolds far from public knowledge. The objective is clear only to a few. The risks are known to none. What begins as a controlled mission slowly transforms into something far more unpredictable. And with every passing moment, the line between strategy and survival begins to blur. The film thrives on tension built through uncertainty. Orders are followed yet never fully explained. Characters move forward driven by discipline rather than clarity. This creates a constant sense of unease. You feel that something is wrong long before it is revealed. Unlike traditional war films that focus on large-scale conflict, this story narrows its lens. It traps you within the unit. Every decision is immediate. Every consequence is personal. The enemy is not always visible, and that absence makes the danger even more intense. Visually, the film embraces darkness, both literal and symbolic. Scenes unfold in confined spaces. Limited visibility heightens every movement. Sound becomes critical. A distant noise, a sudden shift. These elements create a suffocating atmosphere where safety never truly exists. As the operation unravels, the psychological strain becomes impossible to ignore. Trust begins to fracture. Doubt enters every interaction. The mission itself starts to feel secondary compared to the need to survive the situation it has created. What makes this film stand out is its refusal to provide easy answers. It does not explain everything. It leaves gaps. It allows uncertainty to remain. And in doing so, it mirrors the reality of operations that exist beyond public understanding. By the end, you are left with a chilling realization. Not all wars are fought in open fields. Some are fought in silence, hidden from the world, and far more dangerous because of it. Valiant 1, 2025. There is a moment in war when structure collapses, plans dissolve, communication breaks, and what remains is a group of individuals forced to rely on instinct rather than command. This film lives inside that moment and refuses to let you escape it. A routine military operation turns into a nightmare when a unit becomes stranded deep inside hostile territory. The mission is gone. The objective no longer matters. What replaces it is a simple, brutal truth. Get out or do not survive. From the very beginning, the film establishes a sense of disorientation. There is no clear map guiding the audience. Just like the soldiers, you are placed into unfamiliar terrain with limited information. This creates a constant tension that never fully releases. Every step forward feels uncertain. Every decision feels dangerous. The strength of this story lies in its characters. These are not exaggerated heroes. They are trained professionals pushed beyond the limits of their preparation. You witness the shift from discipline to desperation. Orders lose authority. Survival becomes the only command that matters. Leadership is tested in ways that feel deeply personal. The person in charge is no longer just responsible for strategy. They carry the emotional weight of every life in their group. Doubt creeps in. Confidence fades, and yet decisions must still be made. That pressure becomes one of the most compelling aspects of the film. The environment itself becomes an enemy. Harsh terrain, limited resources, constant exposure to threat. The film uses these elements to build a sense of isolation that feels overwhelming. Help is not coming. Rescue is uncertain. Time becomes an invisible force working against them. Combat sequences are intense yet grounded. They are not designed to impress. They are designed to exhaust. Every encounter drains energy. Every escape feels temporary. There is no sense of safety even after surviving an attack. As the story progresses, relationships begin to shift. Trust is tested. Bonds are formed under pressure, and moments of vulnerability reveal the humanity behind the uniforms. These interactions provide emotional depth that elevates the narrative beyond simple survival. By the end, the film leaves you with a lingering question. What defines strength in war? Is it the ability to fight, or the ability to endure when everything else has been stripped away? The answer is not given. It is felt. Primitive War, 2025. War is already chaos, already unpredictable, already terrifying. Now imagine placing something unknown inside that chaos, something that does not follow rules, something that cannot be understood. That is where this film begins. Set during the Vietnam War, the story introduces a military unit sent into dense jungle terrain on what appears to be a standard mission. But very quickly, the environment reveals something unnatural, something that turns a familiar battlefield into a place of primal fear. This is not just a war film, it is a collision between war and the unknown. And that combination creates a level of tension that feels uniquely disturbing. The soldiers are trained to face human enemies. They are not prepared for what they encounter here. The jungle becomes more than a setting. It becomes a living presence. Dense, suffocating, impossible to fully see or understand. Visibility is limited. Sound travels in unpredictable ways. Every movement feels watched. The film uses this environment to create a constant sense of dread. What makes this story compelling is how quickly certainty disappears. Weapons feel inadequate. Training feels irrelevant. The rules of engagement no longer apply. This forces the characters into a psychological struggle as much as a physical one. Fear evolves into something deeper, something almost primal. The film carefully balances its two identities. It does not abandon the reality of war. The tension between soldiers, the strain of command, the weight of mission objectives, all of this remains present, but it is layered with something far more unsettling, the realization that not everything can be controlled. As encounters with the unknown intensify, the narrative becomes more chaotic. Order breaks down, communication fails, and survival becomes increasingly uncertain. The soldiers are no longer just fighting to complete a mission. They are fighting to understand what they are facing. There are moments where silence becomes unbearable, where the absence of action feels more threatening than combat itself. This pacing allows the fear to build slowly. It seeps into every scene rather than exploding all at once. By the time the film reaches its final act, the transformation is complete. What began as a war story has become something far more unpredictable, a confrontation between human conflict and something ancient and unknowable. And in that confrontation, one truth becomes clear. War is terrifying, but the unknown is something else entirely.
Yes.
I'm so some contact with the OSS. They
If there's a joy.
to play in this war. Think about it.
There she is. Yeah.
Fog of War, 2025. War is often remembered through explosions and battles, but the most dangerous moments rarely happen on the front lines. They happen in rooms filled with silence where decisions are made that shape everything that follows. This film lives inside those rooms and forces you to confront the weight of thought rather than action. Set during World War II, the story focuses on intelligence officers and strategists working behind the scenes. These are the individuals who never fire a weapon yet carry the responsibility for thousands of lives. Every choice is calculated, every assumption is tested, and every mistake has consequences that cannot be undone. What makes this film powerful is its restraint. It does not rely on spectacle. Instead, it builds tension through conversation, through pauses, through the unspoken realization that information can be as deadly as any bullet. You begin to understand that war is not just fought with armies. It is fought with knowledge, and sometimes with deception. The narrative unfolds like a slow, tightening grip. Clues emerge piece by piece. Strategies evolve as new information challenges old beliefs. Characters are forced to question their own judgments. Trust becomes fragile. Doubt becomes constant. And the line between certainty and error begins to disappear. There is a psychological intensity that runs beneath every scene. You feel the pressure these characters carry, the awareness that they are shaping events they will never directly witness. This distance creates a unique form of tension. They must act without seeing the immediate result. They must believe in decisions that could lead to either survival or catastrophe. Visually, the film embraces confinement. Rooms feel smaller as the stakes grow larger. Light and shadow are used to reflect the uncertainty that defines the narrative. Faces become landscapes of thought. Expressions reveal internal conflict that words cannot fully express. As the story progresses, the emotional weight becomes impossible to ignore. These are not detached figures. They are human beings grappling with responsibility on an unimaginable scale. The film allows you to sit with that burden, to feel the cost of decisions made in silence. By the end, you are left with a profound realization. War is not only chaos, it is calculation, it is uncertainty. And sometimes the most devastating battles are fought without a single shot being fired.
Martin, it's a great picture.
Truth and Treason. 2025. There is a different kind of courage that exists in war, not the kind that charges forward into battle, but the kind that hides in plain sight, the kind that risks everything without recognition. This film explores that courage through a story built on secrecy and sacrifice. Set within occupied territory during World War II, the narrative follows individuals who choose resistance over safety. They are not soldiers in uniform. They are ordinary people who decide to act against an overwhelming force, and that decision changes everything. From the very beginning, the film establishes a sense of constant danger. There is no safe space. Every interaction carries risk. Every word must be measured. The environment itself feels hostile not because of open conflict, but because of the invisible threat that surrounds it. The strength of this story lies in its focus on moral conflict. These characters are forced to make choices that blur the line between right and wrong. Loyalty becomes complicated, trust becomes fragile, and survival often demands actions that carry heavy consequences. Espionage is not presented as glamorous. It is exhausting. It is terrifying. It requires patience and precision. The film captures this reality with remarkable detail. You see the preparation behind each move, the tension behind every exchange, the fear that never fully disappears. Relationships become central to the narrative. Bonds are formed under pressure and tested under suspicion. The possibility of betrayal lingers in every interaction. This creates a psychological landscape where certainty is impossible. Even allies can become threats. As the resistance effort grows, so does the danger. The stakes escalate in ways that feel both inevitable and overwhelming. Characters are pushed to their limits. Some break, some adapt, and some make choices that define them in ways they never expected. The film does not offer simple answers. It does not present resistance as purely heroic. Instead, it reveals the cost, the emotional toll, the sacrifices that are rarely acknowledged. This honesty gives the story a depth that lingers long after it ends. By the final moments, one truth becomes undeniable. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, hidden, and far more powerful because of it. Final escalation, highest intensity, longest entries, closing with intro and outro as required.
Right, dead bones. Will you help?
The world will tremble. 2025. There are stories in history that feel almost impossible to comprehend, not because they are fictional, but because they are real. This film takes one of those stories and refuses to look away from it. Set within a Nazi concentration camp, the narrative follows prisoners who make an unthinkable decision. They choose to escape not just for freedom, but to reveal the truth of what is happening inside. In a world built on silence and denial, that act becomes one of the most dangerous forms of resistance. From the opening moments, the film establishes an atmosphere that is suffocating. Every frame carries weight. Every sound feels amplified. There is no relief, no illusion of safety. The environment itself becomes a constant reminder of the brutality that defines it. What makes this film extraordinary is its commitment to authenticity. It does not dramatize for effect. It presents reality with a level of honesty that is deeply unsettling. The suffering is not exaggerated. It is observed, and that makes it far more powerful. The characters are not defined by heroism in the traditional sense. They are defined by endurance, by the ability to continue despite conditions designed to break them. Their strength is quiet, internal, and often invisible to those around them. The escape itself is not portrayed as a moment of triumph. It is a process filled with uncertainty. Every step forward carries the risk of immediate death. Every decision must be calculated with precision. The tension is relentless because the consequences are absolute. As the story unfolds, the emotional impact deepens. You begin to understand that survival is not the only objective. Bearing witness becomes equally important. The need to expose the truth transforms the narrative into something larger than individual survival. There are moments where hope appears fragile yet undeniable. Small acts of defiance, brief connections between characters. These moments provide contrast to the overwhelming darkness and remind you of the humanity that persists even in the worst conditions. By the time the film reaches its conclusion, it leaves you with a profound sense of responsibility, not just to remember but to understand, to acknowledge what happened and what it meant, because some stories are not meant to entertain, they are meant to be carried forward. Warfare. 2025. War is often reconstructed through memory, through interpretation, through distance. But this film removes that distance completely. It does not feel like a retelling, it feels like an experience happening in real time. Built from the perspective of a Navy SEAL mission, the story unfolds with a level of immediacy that is almost overwhelming. There is no traditional structure guiding the narrative. No clear beginning or end, just a continuous flow of events that mirror the unpredictability of combat itself. From the first moment, the film places you inside the operation. There is no introduction designed to ease you in. You are there, listening, watching, trying to understand what is happening as it unfolds. This creates an immersion that is rare even within the war genre. What sets this film apart is its dedication to realism. The details are precise. The communication feels authentic. The movements are deliberate. Every aspect is grounded in the lived experience of those who have been in similar situations. This authenticity transforms the film from a story into something far more visceral. Combat is not presented as spectacle. It is chaotic, disorienting, often confusing. You do not always understand where the threat is coming from, and that uncertainty becomes one of the most powerful elements of the film. It forces you to share the perspective of the soldiers rather than observe them from a safe distance. Sound design plays a critical role in building this experience. Sudden bursts of noise, moments of silence, the constant presence of tension even when nothing appears to be happening. These elements work together to create a sense of immersion that is difficult to escape. The characters are defined through action rather than exposition. You learn who they are by how they respond to pressure, by how they communicate, by how they support each other when everything begins to collapse. This approach creates a level of authenticity that feels deeply human. As the mission progresses, the emotional weight becomes increasingly intense. Decisions must be made quickly. Mistakes cannot be undone. And the consequences of every action become immediate and irreversible. There is no attempt to simplify the experience, no effort to frame it as heroic or tragic in a traditional sense. The film simply presents it as it is. Raw, unfiltered, and deeply unsettling. By the end, you are left with something that feels less like a conclusion and more like a lingering presence. A reminder that war is not a story that can be neatly resolved. It is something that continues, long after the screen fades to black. War stories are not just history, they are warnings. They remind us what happens when humanity is pushed to its edge. If one of these films stayed with you, then the story did its job. Tell me which one hit you the hardest and stay with us for more deep dives.
Say that. Radio them right now.